Today, let's collect Storm. Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and the 24th episode of our Let's Collect series. Our Let's Collect series is our series where we look at the key comics, important storylines, and fun covers for a particular character. We're up to 24 of these at this point. We've done a bunch of Marvel and DC stuff. We've started doing a few non-Marvel and DC characters, but this is kind of your initial guide to collecting a character. These are not meant to be full on everything you potentially would want or need collecting a character, although it does give you a pretty good place to start. We usually do 10 keys, 10 covers, and 5 story arcs in our videos. Today we're going to be talking about Storm, one of my personal favorite X-Men, one of the key members of the new team when it relaunched with Chris Claremont as the writer back in the 70s, and has really been a very important X-Men and a leader of the X-Men ever since. Before we dig into some of this, I used to do just a little bit of housekeeping here. I used to do actual values at the time I did this video of what these keys and covers and stuff would cost. Recently, I've been doing them as categories. I'm going to put those categories up now, but I hadn't really given a reference to what I meant when I would, depending on how many dollar signs I was giving. These are broader categories. Hopefully they'll be a little more relevant than actual sale prices for longer, but at least gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm putting, when you see those dollar signs on the bottom of some of these slides coming up as we go through the keys and that kind of stuff. So with that, we are talking Storm today. Like I said, one of my favorite X-Men and just a very important Marvel character ever since she's been introduced. And really brought about a change in a lot of ways, and like somehow how female characters were looked at Marvel at the time, and taking a more and bigger role than a lot of other female characters were getting. So we're going to kick this off by looking at the 10 key comics I pulled together for Storm. First up for the keys, we have Giant Size X-Men #1, a true grail from the Bronze Age. With these 3 first appearances I've listed, plus a couple of additional ones, this is a goal for any X-Men collector. Next, we have X-Men #94. This is where Claremont takes over, second appearance of all these characters, and another grail book that really has a lot of value and people chase a lot. Next, we have X-Men 102, The Origin of Storm. This continues in 103. This is a relatively reasonable book compared to the first 2, but still an expensive book to get. Next, we have X-Men 139. Storm becomes the leader, taking over after Cyclops quits. Really shows her stepping up to lead the team. Next, we have X-Men 173. This is the first appearance of Mohawk Storm. You may not think this is a key, but I think it does. It's an iconic look for her and really changed the tide for her. Next, X-Men 185. She loses her powers, and she loses them for a really, really long time. And we see her take on a whole different aspect of her character because of this. Next, we have X-Men Annual #9. Storm is worthy. She picks up Mjolnir, and Loki tries to trick her into taking a copy and working for him. She doesn't, showing she truly is worthy. Next, we have Storm #1. She finally got our solo series in the 90s. She's since had, I think she's on volume 4. They've all been miniseries, but great to see her finally get her own book. Black Panther #18. Her and T'Challa get married. There's some other keys around this when he proposes and when they meet, but this is the one I picked for this relationship. And then finally, we have Planet Size X-Men #1. She becomes the Queen Regent of Mars when the X-Men terraform Mars and move there. Alright, so those were your Storm key comics. A couple of really big books there at the beginning, but some of the later books are very affordable, and yeah, it's a hard get when you have like multiple first appearances in a book, especially multiple first appearances like that, to get that giant size X-Men one. But Storm as a character is definitely worth that kind of money, especially when you add in Colossus and Nightcrawler. But still great books, and you can still get into some of her keys for reasonable. All right, next up, we're going to be doing the important story arcs for Storm. There's a lot of story arcs that you could go with here. And as I was getting ready to pull these together, I thought to myself, I know I'm good friends with one of the biggest X-Men and Storm fans there is. So you're going to get my story arcs in a minute, but we're going to kick this off. My friend John from John's Comics with Kids is going to start this off by giving his top 3 Storm stories.
Storm is my personal favorite comic book character and easily one of the most iconic across all of comic book history. I've got 3 great stories that anybody should check out if they're a fan of her. Of course, I'm starting with the Claremont Cockrum era of Uncanny X-Men. This is issue 102, followed by issue 103. We get Storm's origin and the connection to her family and the different nations that she lived in growing up. We also get a chance to deal with her claustrophobia, battling the Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy. This is a really powerful issue, getting to look at overcoming things that seem to define us. If you're new to the character, this would be a great jumping on point for her. I also love the life-death storyline. This starts in issue 186. Barry Windsor Smith is on pencils now. And we also have issue 198, which is the follow-up. I also want to throw in issue 201. This really is a story dealing with Storm having no powers. How does that define her now? She's lost her abilities that she used to feel like were the core essence of who she is. So she has to confront that new identity. I got a really cool hardcover of this that includes a lot of other really cool issues as well. So if you want to collect that storyline, this is a great way to do it. Lastly, I'm going to go with a modern story. This starts off with Planet Size X-Men #1. This was a one-off, lots of really great variants. Russell Dauterman did one that I thought was particularly amazing, but it has to do with terraforming Mars so that mutants could go and live there, and of course Storm becoming a leader on that planet. Omega-level mutants doing what they can to really create a life-sustaining place on Mars. And it continues through Sword issues 6, 7, and 8. We get Doctor Doom coming up there to confront her and this new powerhouse place that she's living, and Storm becoming a new kind of leader, not just for the X-Men, but galactically a leader for humanity. Great story.
All right, I want to say thanks to John for pulling together those stories for me. He stole right off my list. Every one of those were ones I had in my potential list for story arcs, but it allows me to put forward some other Storm stories here that you might want to look at after you look at John's 3 choices. I think those are probably the best 3. But after you look at those, here are some other stories that you can look at for Storm. Okay, my choices for Storm stories following John's picks. First up, we have Dancing in the Dark, X-Men 169 and 170, where Storm fights to protect the X-Men, save Angel, and take leadership of the Morlocks with Callisto without her powers. Just a really great book and one of the first X-Men comics I ever read. Next, we have Crucible, X-Men 215 and 216. This is during the period where Storm has no powers, and she takes on some vigilantes that are hunting her with superpowers, and more than holds her own until Wolverine can come help. Next, we have Aurora Before the Storm. This collects Aurora Before the Storm 1 through 4 and some additional stories. This is a retelling of her origin in much more detail than we got in 102 and 103. And a great place to follow up if you've read those. Next, we have Worlds Apart. X-Men Worlds Apart 1 through 4. This is a story about Shadow King returns to kind of split Storm away from both Wakanda and the X-Men, and her finding a path to balance her role with both and keep moving forward. And then finally, we have X-Men Red Volume 2. This is ongoing, and this is kind of the continuation of that Mars story that John talked about and what's going on right now. A great place to jump in and keep reading currently if you want to stick with Storm. All right, so we've made it through the key comics and the important story arcs for Storm. It's now to talk about some of those fun covers. As always, when I do the covers, I try to avoid overlap in artists, and I try to avoid any of the keys, having those repeated in my covers. So you won't see any of those here. Interestingly enough, for Storm, for such an iconic character, such an important character to Marvel Comics, and really compared to a lot of the other female characters, she doesn't have a ton of iconic covers that people instantly think about. She has a few, but not as many as you would think for others. And she doesn't really have any artists that have done like a long run of iconic covers for Storm. You know, there's no Adam Hughes Catwoman here. There's no Jenny Frison on Wonder Woman. There's nothing like that where you get an artist that stays on a book for a long time and you get a bunch of covers for Storm. I think the closest she comes is maybe on Storm Volume 3 with Stephanie Hans, but we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, so she doesn't have a ton of truly iconic covers, at least in terms of crossover and high value and that kind of thing that people consistently chase. But she does have a lot of amazing covers, and it was actually really hard to narrow this down. So the advantage of them not being necessarily iconic or crossover is that most of them are super affordable. So here are my choices for the fun covers of Storm. Okay, there's not a lot of early covers that are great for Storm, but X-Men Annual number 6 is this Bill Sienkiewicz cover is my personal favorite from the early 80s. Vampire Storm looking awesome, and I really love that cover. X-Men 449, this Greg Land cover. I'm not a huge fan of Greg Land, but I love just the joy this homage cover that he did back in 2004. Next, I had to include Michael Turner, Black Panther number 18, the variant to the wedding issue. Huge Turner fan, and I just love this. This is maybe, if there is an iconic Storm cover, that's it. Next, we have X-Men number 29 from Volume 3. This Alex Ross cover beat out the Timeless variant for me. I just love it. Her front and center with all the X-Men. Next, we have House of X number 2, the Mike Huddleston 1 and 10. I just love this cover. Her in Africa with the animals, with Kilimanjaro on the back. I just think it's a great cover. Next, we have Giant Size X-Men Storm number 1, the Russell Donnerman cover. There's a lot of Donnerman covers that I considered, but I decided this was my favorite, so this one made the list. Next, we have Sword number 8, the Stefano Caselli cover. I know a lot of people wouldn't think this is a great cover, but I just love this, showing her fighting with the knives, without her powers. Just a great take on Storm. Next is Oliver Coipel 1 in 50 incentive for Planet Size X-Men. Just absolutely gorgeous. I can't say anything else about it. This Torrin Clark X-Men Red number 1 promo variant with the 3 facets of Storm here. I just absolutely love this cover. Just a great cover with a very cheap. And finally, we have Storm number 8. This is my choice from the Stephanie Hans covers from Storm Volume 3. Love this cover, but obviously I cheated a little bit because on the thumbnail I used 11. I had a hard time deciding between 8 and 11. So here's your bonus Storm cover. Okay, so those were my 10 choices for fun covers for Storm. But I got John to do story arcs. I couldn't let him go without pitching in some covers. I'm going to give him last word on the best or fun covers that you can collect for Storm. So if you thought I missed a few, this might be where they're at, as I did make sure I avoided overlapping with John on these. But yeah, so here comes John's choices for the fun covers for Storm.
Over the years, there have been some great Storm covers, but I'm going to give you my 5 favorites. I'm going to start off with this one from Dave Cockrum, and this is just an absolute great banger cover. Issue 147, part 2 of the Doctor Doom storyline. You've got sort of Storm as Phoenix, almost kind of action going on here. The team cowering, even Doctor Doom cowering in fear from the rogue Storm. Great, great cover. Then I'm going to jump to Whilce Portacio, issue 290. This is just absolutely amazing. When I think of like the 90s X-Men and the 90s Storm, this is absolutely the only cover that should come to mind. Just perfect all around. Background, pose, everything. Nailed it. Now I'm going to jump to a more modern cover. This is Marauders issue number 2. This is a variant from Unknown Comics. Absolutely love this. This is from Cale New. So this is the Virgin variant. Just beautiful. Love a good Sentinels cover. You get Sentinels and Storm and all the electricity. Beautiful. Absolutely fantastic. Then I'm going to go to this Jen Bartel. This is Marvel Comics 1000, the 1 in 50. And you get all the different variations on Storm going on here. Just an absolute masterpiece. She's such a talented artist. And when I started looking over this list, I had to go out and buy this because I realized I hadn't purchased it. You can get these for a steal these days. Lastly, I'm going to go with 3 covers because David Nakayama did a great job with his Immortal X-Men cover, and it comes in different colors. My personal favorite is the gold, but I know a lot of people love the black cover background. Just an absolute great cover. Nakayama always doing great work, and I was lucky enough to have him sign these. What were your favorites?
All right, everyone. So that's our full run on Storm. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank my friend John for contributing to this Let's Collect video, making it a little more interesting, getting a second perspective on some of these. I really appreciate him stopping by. His link to his channel and his Instagram are in the description below. So go check out John's channel. He does a lot of fun stuff. And with that, we will catch you next time.